Hello and welcome to Manny Beal, and also welcome to hopefully the last part of my deconstruction of Stefan Molyneux's um, self-loathing rant on his series on the history of philosophers. And go visit rss.com to find this series and finding this particular podcast, which is about 57 minutes long, 57 and a half. In the last, is it 5 parts I've done on a row? This is part 6, I believe. Let me start. I actually, one of the sticks broke off my glasses here, so I'm a little handicapped with regards to my vision. Um, I got to the 47 minutes, so there's 10 minutes left, so I should be able to get through this within the hour, right? So so far it has felt very much like actually just his rage and ranting, and not only a rage but a planned rage, right? It's like, oh, I have been so virtuous. I've done 16 philosophers, and after 16 philosophers, none of them have given me a moral principle or anything that says that murder is wrong, right? So now I'm raging and I'm angry and I'm shouting at the clouds so you understand how important I am, because I can tell you how bad other philosophers are, which means implicitly that I'm a very good philosopher, right? This is sort of the sophistry that is embedded in what he's doing here, right? I sense it very strongly, right? Okay, let's just jump in and see how it goes.
All of these brilliant minds, polymaths, geniuses, Renaissance men, jack of all trades, masters of all. Hey, I wonder why murder is wrong. Now, they couldn't say, well, that's just a matter of faith, because these guys were scientists. So because they were scientists, they didn't say, oh, well, it's just a matter of faith. No, they wanted to understand the world, dig in to what made matter and energy tick and dance. They wanted to know.
I'm just curious. This guy, he's calling himself an empiricist, right? I'm just curious how he gets to the idea of matter and energy, right? Because that's not empirical. Matter is not empirical. That's a mental abstraction, a artificial category of particular experiences, right? So you first need to have the empirical experience that you can then classify as matter or energy, which is even more elusive in my opinion. I'm not saying you can't operate with it. Just understand what I'm saying, right? But from an empirical standpoint, he does not, or at least I'm speaking for myself, I'm not experiencing matter. I have certain colors and sounds and tastes and feels which I can then classify as matter, right? Now, the philosophical aspect of this is, what are you actually doing when you're doing this, right? Just saying there are matter and energy out there, and you should, be scientific, right? You are bringing in all sorts of abstractions as if they are empirical. Now you need to differentiate what when you are talking about something that is strictly empirical and what is derived from that empirical stuff, right? Matter is a derivative of your experiences. Matter is not empirical. You need to be very strict. Maybe you can make a better argument for this than I can, right? And maybe I will be willing to, take it on, right? But matter, what color does matter have? It doesn't have a particular color, right? Does matter have a color? Does matter have a sound? Does matter have a taste? Right? Matter is an abstraction. It's a label. It's an artificial, you could maybe say concept, right? But I would hesitate to use the term concept in this regard because I would like it to be something different. It's something that you are adding to the thing after the fact, after the empirical fact, right? When you have experienced colors and sounds and so on, then you add the term matter to some aspect of it. And after that, you pretend that you're actually experiencing empirically that label which you were prior in the first place adding after the fact. You need to be very, very, very clear on this. Otherwise, you're just screwing around with the ideas and the empiricism and what it means to have a concept or a cognition or a theory or an abstraction and all these things. It all ends up in this big gumbo of philosophical brainstorming that is incoherent, right? You need to be strict about it, right?
Mercury, change based upon elevation. Could barometric pressure be measured? They didn't just sit there and say, well, you pray wherever you are, and it's a matter of faith how high up you are. No, they wanted to understand it. They wanted to know it in detail. And you think of all these efforts and crazy geometrical analyses and optics and rainbows, and the motion of the planets. Can you tell me why murder is wrong? No!
It's getting... Now, I know that he doesn't understand it, so when he mentions it again at this point and saying murder is wrong, it's not like he's coming up with a new problem. It's the same problem, right? But it's actually incredible that he's unable to see that he's just stating the obvious by saying murder is wrong. Because murder is a wrong kind of whatever, right? Murder has imbued the idea of wrongness within the term. You could say ending someone's life. That is devoid of moral content, right? So when do you get to add the wrongness to it and call it murder? What is it empirically about whatever the hell is going on there, which is based on colors, sounds, taste, and so on, which is empirical data? How do you get to it? If you can't get it to it empirically, then shut the fuck up about combining science, empiricism, and so on with morality. Because it can come from the outside then, right? So as Hume pointed out, you can't go around experiencing morality as if when you argue for it, then you say this is the case and that is the case, this is going on, that is going on, therefore you should and shouldn't. It's like out of the blue, where the hell does it come from? It's not empirically based, right? If you don't get this, right, the only thing people are going to do in 500 years, if anybody remember you at that point, they're going to laugh their asses off because you're too stupid to understand what you're doing.
That's a matter of faith. Really. So science is a matter of reason, but morality is a matter of faith. Well, we don't want to step on the toes of the priests. It's like, no.
Okay, now he's creating all sorts of, strawman arguments, right? All kinds of strawman arguments. Oh, they said this and they said that. He's basically creating strawmen and then pulling them down, right? Now, this is page 1 kind of sophistry, right? He is making up arguments, placing them on certain persons, and then he's refuting those arguments, trying to convince you that he's actually arguing with somebody, right? He's just arguing with himself and his manic depression of some kind, right? Be aware of these kind of people who say, oh, this person 200 years ago said this, and I'm going to pull down that argument, right? Just give me some quotes, please, right? Give me some fucking quotes, Mr. Art of the Argument.
No, you're already doing that by saying that there's a solar system that doesn't require God's intervention. No, you've already done that. You're pushing back the age of miracles, making the absolutism of matter and the principles of matter and energy absolute and universal. eliminates miracles. No, you're already all over the toes of the priests. Can't say that's a thing. Why not? Why not prove morality? That's the gig. That's the whole job. Now the answer.
Again, it's incredible that he thinks you can prove morality, right? I would like him to come up with some kind of coherent definition of what it entails to do a proof, right? If he says syllogism, he's a fucking idiot, right? You're not proving anything with syllogism. In fact, the only thing that you don't do with that syllogism is proving anything, right? It's basically something you are referring to, something that has already been proven by using a syllogism. If you say all men are mortal, that has to be proved, right? That has to be proven, if anything. Yeah, I wouldn't use the term proven, but in his context there, right? If you say all men are mortal, how the hell do you know that? How do you prove that, right? That's kind of a hypothesis, maybe, right? All men are mortal, as if it's given to you, right? If anything needs to be proven, it needs to be proven that all men are mortal, right? How do you go about do that, right? But if it's proven, then if Socrates is a man, he must be mortal, right? So you have to prove the major premise in your syllogism. So you can't use your syllogism to prove anything within the syllogism, man, right? Now, if he doesn't understand this, it just goes to show how fucking ignorant and stupid he is, right? He has no clue what he is doing, right? He has no clue. He's basically an idiot, man, right? He's a very eloquent and very good at throwing around words. But that doesn't make him less of an idiot when you deconstruct it, right?
So, of course, it's a combination of secular power and parental brutality. A parent who hits you while saying hitting is wrong is a moral hypocrite who's using morality to make you.
No. A contradiction is not necessarily wrong, right? If you're contradicting your own principles, that doesn't make it wrong. It could make it right. If you're contradicting something that is not wrong, right? If you're contradicting something that is wrong, then you're doing something that isn't wrong because you're contradicting it, right? So it could be right. He's switching between something that seems to be absolute and then something that is relative, or a analysis of the inherent statement and the actual actions performed, right? If you hit your children and say hitting is wrong, you are contradicting your own statement, but you doesn't prove anything about that wrongness by contradicting it, right? He's on some kind of weird planet where he can bring in or drag out any kind of coherence about what he's doing. He's floating in some kind of mental state where he can bring in and take out whatever he wants in the moment to make it fit some kind of narrative that is not coherent, right? That's why he's have so big problems in arguing for his position on this ethics of his, right? It's because it's flawed from the ground up. It's incoherent. It doesn't follow. It's dysfunctional, basically. No wonder people are not taken seriously, because they well shouldn't, right? It's so ridiculously bad.
You quote good through their own evil actions.
What's the evil action? Now it's the action that is evil. So if you hit someone, it's evil. Okay, so somebody putting their knee on somebody's face until they die from exhaustion or from, choking, like that cop, that guy in the blue uniform did with that black man called Floyd, right? So that's evil. No. No, that's just self-defense, something, whatever. So he's switching over to the action now rather than the comparison with the statement and the inherent contradiction in the action compared to the statement of what it means to be moral or immoral. So he's not proving anything. He's just switching between actions and statements and in implicit statement and explicit statements and his own ideals. And, it's all this gumbo of things that is, it's not strict. It's not philosophy. It's confirmation bias, right? He's not a good philosopher. If it's not fucking clear cut as a Japanese kitchen knife, right? It's not good philosophy, mate.
And to look at a parent and say, your, quote, morality is the manipulations of a devilish hypocrisy, that's tough. And again, I can appreciate this all the more. I was talking to my daughter this morning and said, have I ever used intimidation to get you to do what I want? And she said, I can't think of a time. And I said, I may have been ill-tempered once or twice or, snapped or whatever, but then I apologize and all that. But the purpose is not to come in and make you do things through intimidation. Obviously no violence, but even,
Well, his shitty ethics is a kind of intimidation, right? He's intimidating his family with his, holy grail of philosophy, which he has told everybody around him and, 500,000 people around the world, basically, and a lot of Christians, apparently. It's so perfect, right? So that's intimidating. It's intimidating to have a father who claims to have found the perfect principle, or not even a perfect principle, but the perfect framework for ethics, right? Already there, you have a sense that what the hell is he talking about, right? That's fucking intimidating. But it's implicit intimidating. It's not explicit intimidation, right?
As parents, you need an unbelievably light touch. As parents, your lips are right up against your child's ear, so to speak. And so you've got to speak very softly. Because you have such dominance and authority simply by being older, bigger, wiser, stronger. Not to mention all the legal and economic independence relative to children. You have so much authority that you need to be super light in your touch. Super light. So, I think the answer is that the philosophers could not process their childhood trauma. I think this is why...
Oh, give me a fucking break, man. It's the same story. Whenever somebody disagrees or doesn't have gone to the length he thinks he's gone to in his philosophy, there's something wrong with their childhood, right? I mean, is this not projection of some kind? I'm just sick and tired of this. Yeah. You're not arriving at UPB. So there must be something wrong with your childhood. No, man. I'm not saying there isn't anything that you could possibly, dive into about your childhood. I guess mostly everybody could. But you have to look at the philosophy, man, right? You have to look at the statements. You are Mr. Art of the argument. Look at the fucking arguments. Bring out some quotes and some arguments these philosophers have done, and where they sort of step out of the chain of argumentation, causation, whatever, right? Where they leave ethics at the roadside, right? Give me the example of where they go wrong, rather than you bringing in all sorts of straw men and try to pull them down and frame them as having a bad childhood. That's ridiculous, man, right? And it says a lot about how stupid you are at doing philosophy. Because all you want to is project your own shitty childhood onto somebody else in order to invalidate their philosophy. How ridiculous is that?
This came out after talking about the brutality of Blaise Pascal's father, Etienne, that he would threaten an innocent woman with murder and beat her half to death because he thought she was a witch who had...
But it has no real... I understand that, yeah, it might have influenced the person, Blaise Pascal. But look at the fucking arguments, right? Look at this philosophy. Look at what is argued. And and whether it's good or badly argued. That's why I'm deconstructing your philosophy in order to figure out what are you actually doing. I don't care about your childhood, right? I don't care about your family. It has no bearing on your philosophy. Is it good philosophy? Is it bad philosophy? To be very sort of, a dichotomy, right? It's a degree, I guess, right? I look at the philosophy. If I can't find something that is coherent and decent in there, I don't give a shit if you have a good or bad childhood, or you have a good or bad, relation in your family, whatever. And if you're a vegan, I don't give a shit. I care about fucking philosophy, man, right? Give me some fucking good philosophy instead of this strawman bullshit, man, and projecting your own shitty childhood onto somebody else as an argument for philosophical nature. It's ridiculously stupid, man.
Cursed his son. But this is who he grew up with. How on earth was he supposed to get universal morality with that amount of trauma in his past? Now I say, yes, well, I had trauma in my past. Yes, I did. I worked very hard to deal with it and got a lot.
Oh, so you work very hard, and therefore your philosophy is good, right? No, that doesn't follow. It doesn't follow just because you went to a shrink that all of a sudden all your philosophy clicked into place or something like that. You're just you're trying to close, a bleeding hole somewhere, right? In your psychology. It doesn't make your philosophy good necessarily, right? Doesn't make it bad either, I guess. You have to look at the philosophy. And when I look at your philosophy, what I see is a joke, basically, right? Yeah, it's not all of it that is completely crazy, but the cornerstones, or where there should be cornerstones in your philosophy, there isn't anything. Like, I don't have to prove that murder is wrong as a central sentence in your ethics, you fucking moron, man, right? And and then you spend like maybe 40 pages in your Art of the Argument talking about trying to prove there isn't a demon in Descartes' demon thought experiment, right? Things like that, where you're sort of going out on a limb on something where you think that if I have disproven this, I have proven my own. It's you don't understand what it takes to do good philosophy, right? When you are doing philosophy and presenting philosophy, you are not focused. You shouldn't be focused on the consequences. You should be strictly focused on the thinking between the consequences, right? The thinking is what should elevate somebody else to start thinking, not necessarily along the same lines, but encourage them to make the same kind of structured thinking in order to get to some consequence or to some conclusion, right? Don't throw in the conclusion and then try to connect the dots in the sophist way that I have to get to the non-aggression principle, therefore I will come up with UPB, right? That's just, it's stillborn from the start. Because if you are a good philosopher or good at philosophizing yourself, not necessarily presenting it, but at least thinking it, right? You immediately spot when somebody's trying to connect the dots, right? Because there's something that is left out, and there's something that is overblown with attention in the philosophy and so on, right? It's clearly connecting the dot. Okay, I need to get to this dot, then I need to get to this dot, and they're sort of leaving big swaths of things outside the door that would otherwise need to be dealt with, but it's left at the roadside because I don't need it in order to connect my dots, right? So he's a dot connector. He's just going with where he needs to go and then cherry picks whatever he needs to get there. It looks like he has done some rigid philosophy. He hasn't, right? He's just getting to the point he needs to get to, and a preconceived idea where he needs to be, and then he's going there using his sophist approach to it, right? And then he presents that as the holy grail of philosophy, man, right? Come on, give me a fucking break, man.
A lot of help from thinkers, writers, therapists. And I think I just had this unbelievable anger, impatience, frustration, and a blind, blank, unstoppable will to just get this freaking answer. It's been too long. I can't be a philosopher
if you have presented the answer 15 years ago, why are you sitting here shouting at the clouds 15 years later? What's the problem with you, right? What doesn't have any traction? If you have come up with the answer, show it. Show how. Show the people where they go wrong, or or maybe even criticize yourself, right? Maybe go back to the drawing board. Maybe this UPB book wasn't that great after all, right? Maybe there's some problem somewhere, right? Maybe grab your own tits before you start to shout at 2,000 years of philosophy, right? I mean, and these people, they can't defend themselves, right? Against your strawman shit. And most people listening to this, they're not going to read, Socrates or Plato or whatever, Anselmo, what was you call Anselmo or Spinoza, whatever. They're not going to read 400 pages of Spinoza in order to figure out what the hell Spinoza said. They're just going to rely on whatever Stefan Molyneux pulled down of a straw man, right? And thinking that he's pretty smart. It takes no effort doing this shit. He's just very eloquent about it and good at using these words, so it sounds like he's smart. He's an idiot, man. He doesn't know what he's doing. He has no fucking clue what he's doing. There's nobody to stop him. And if there's anybody who have a sufficient level of philosophical skill and critical skill, he's going to shout at them until they leave, just like he did with me when I was on his show discussing metaphysics, right? So it seems to me, deep down inside, he's unable to criticize himself, right? He can't go and say, maybe there's something wrong with my UPP book. Maybe I should go back and, collect all the criticism I've got and start from afresh, right? Make version 2 or something like that, right? He's never going to do that because that would implicitly say he might have been wrong about certain aspects of morality the last 15 years. So he would rather protect his own shit than be sort of critical of it, right? So he can't be trusted, basically.
entire discipline is based on a fraud, that it's all about morality, but philosophers would rather look at absolutely anything and everything other than morality. Reason and evidence is the key.
I need to find some Hume here, right? So I'm sorry I didn't prepare this. No. Maybe I let that one search.
You apply that to the core
It
reason.
goes very slowly when I'm using this streaming software. It eats a lot of the resources on my laptop here. So let that just roam in the background while I keep going here.
The entire discipline? No. Can you talk about that? No.
Strawman.
But maybe we can talk about, animal rights or intellectual property or I don't know whether nouns actually exist or the relationship. Can you talk about morals? Reason and evidence. Can you bring that to morals? No. That exposes parental hypocrisy and wrongdoing. And whether that's my peculiar will, the internet,
I'm not to be honest, to be fair, I'm not ruling out that philosophers in general might suffer from a bit of cognitive dissonance in the if I find a moral principle that goes against that rubs against that rocks the boat, I might have my head cut off, right? So I certainly won't rule that out. But it doesn't follow just because some philosopher didn't come up with the perfect moral principle that they had a bad childhood, and it maybe it wasn't a part of what they were doing, right? Maybe they thought that, well, morality is not a part of philosophy because until maybe all the way up to the Enlightenment, maybe most people thought of philosophy or morality as something that had to do with religion, right? It was not because philosophy tended, well, to some extent at least, to be natural philosophy, right? And when Hume came around and said, well, you can't observe morality, basically, right? And people have been struggling with Hume ever since, right? So it condensed after 2,000 years into Hume saying, well, what you're trying to do is invalid. It doesn't follow from your statement. You're arguing in a way that is unfounded, right? And there might be something, there might be a reason why he's stopping now, because he will get to, this is the point where he should be getting to Hume. Hume is the early 1700s, right? And John Locke ended in the early 1700s, I think, late 1600s, early 1700s, early 1700s, I think, right? So this would be the time of Hume, right? Hume refers at least a few times to Locke, I believe, right? And talking about Locke had perverted, the metaphysics and so on. This is where he should be getting to Hume. Now, I would very much like him to do Hume, because there are some things about Hume that is sort of very hard to get by, right? The Hume-Izard gap, the causation, and there's a few other things I forget, right? Like you can't. Oh, never mind. There's 2 or 3 things that are sort of cornerstones of Hume, right? I'm not in my Hume mode at the moment, but at least the Izard gap is sort of towering, conclusion, right? That he apparently doesn't want to go into, because he stops here, and why I'm looking for Hume's treatise up here is because the subtitle is A Treatise of Human Nature, being an attempt to introduce the experimental method of reasoning into moral subjects. Right? Isn't this what Stefan Molyneux is asking for? Right? An attempt and introduce the experimental method of reasoning into moral subjects. And I would interpret this as saying, how can you not establish morality from empiricism, but how can you remove all the bad attempts at morality, pretending that you're actually using empiricism? Because I think that's what he's doing, right? He's introducing an experimental method into reasoning, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to prove morality using an experimental method. Just read carefully what he doesn't say, right? Okay. If he doesn't do Hume, right, after this fucking stupid rant, right, he's a moron, right? Right? He's a fucking moron if he doesn't do Hume. And if he doesn't give Hume the necessary respect he deserves, after listening to this swath of bile from him, right?
But in circumstances, who knows? It's a combination of all of these things. But they should have done it, man. They should have done it. I mean, how long do you have a discipline entirely and solely focused on the building of bridges? How long do you have that discipline before you look around and notice there aren't any freaking bridges? Not a single bridge has been built.
No, but if you build a bridge that when people walk over it, the bridge collapses, right? And people die. You will be blamed for building that bridge, wouldn't you, right? Now, what people do with Stefan Molyneux' UPB is saying, that's not a fucking bridge, right? And Stefan Molyneux still say, oh yeah, I built a bridge, look, that's a bridge. And people looking at it saying, what the hell? It's a pile of sticks. There's no bridge there, right? There's no bridge. That's your fucking problem. You haven't even built a bridge, right? And you can't even see that you haven't built a bridge because you don't even understand to what it means to build a bridge.
Built. That's something you gotta notice, right? You gotta see that. Now, again, I'm not saying then you gotta go build a bridge, but at least stop pretending. Stop pretending that you're in this big bridge building club. Just walk away. I walk away from the areas where I don't believe that rational analysis does much good anymore. Just walk away. Say why, move on. Don't do it anymore. Just have that integrity, especially since you're lecturing everybody else on integrity, honesty, virtue.
Straw man.
The whole point of philosophy is morality. And not one philosopher.
Bring in some quotes, please, right? You are railing against not only 16 particular philosophers that you have mentioned, and maybe more because one of them is pre-Socratics, I think. Well, I may be wrong about that, right? But you're basically taking a big dump on 2,000 years of various philosophers, right? And saying they're idiots and they're corrupt and all that. That is a fucking big statement, right? And then when I look at what you have done, right? And I have deconstructed, just to mention it once again, I have deconstructed your book, Universally Preferable Behavior, at least the first part, which should pretends to be a proof of what this framework actually is, right? And it sucks like a hungry whore, right? It's like, it's on another level of stupid philosophy, right? And I can say that with confidence because I've fucking deconstructed basically every sentence of that part, right? Don't give me any fucking dump on these philosophers who worked in another time and another social structure and from another. At least they did something rather than suck up to Christianity, right? Fuck off, man.
In the multi-thousand-year history of philosophy, has produced a rational proof of ethics that explains the evidence of history. If science is reason and evidence applied to matter,
history cannot be evidence, right? I mean, the evidence of history, no, history is an interpretation of evidence, right? If anything. There's not evidence of history. Now, I may be, fly fucking this, right? But I'm just getting more and more concerned about his loose use of, he's just fucking throwing words at you, right? It's like he paints a mental picture of him being some kind of superior philosopher who is taking things to another level because these pathetic losers had a bad childhood or something like that, right? It's all words. There is no philosophy there, other than him, so far up his own ass that he can only consider that a smell of strawberries, right?
then superstitious societies will be less productive, less sophisticated, have less control over matter, be more subject to nature's whims, And that, of course, is the case, that the more superstitious a society, the less control they have over nature. The less productive, the less valuable is their relationship to matter. Property rights are important, therefore, where free trade diminishes through mercantilism, through colonialism, through socialism, through communism, property rights are an essential value and virtue, respect for property rights, and therefore, whenever societies wreck property rights, they should become less productive thereby. And this is all very proven. Love is our involuntary response to virtue. If we're virtuous, therefore, societies where evil grows should result in less love. And this we can see in the modern world. Love is diminishing, love is collapsing, love is fading. Violence is displacing it. The only choices we really have: the reason that leads to love, or the mysticism that leads to violence.
And Christianity is not mysticism, right? You're leaning, you're spooning with Christianity. You're maybe not saying, yeah, I'm Christian, right? But you're fucking sucking their ass big time now, right? And you think that that's not mysticism. It's that you're cherry picking. You're just arguing so you get whatever result you want. It's pathetic, man, right?
Just tell me why murder is wrong. Just tell me why theft is wrong.
Now, why don't you tell me why murder is wrong, right? Because that's your job as a philosopher. If you have something called wrongness, give me a fucking description of how you get to it, right? That's what Hume points out. He says to you, you can't experience it empirically, right? And actually, if you actually analyze, and I was a bit ahead of myself, he doesn't say that. He says, unless you find a very good argument for how you can experience immorality, I would say you can't, right? I would consider it impossible until you show me how you can argue by pointing and say, hey, there's immorality over there, right? Or morality for that matter. In this good and evil dichotomy that is basically stupid and religious in nature and mystic, actually, right? Point to the fucking badness, right? How do I experience it? What color does it have? What sound does it have? What taste does it have? Explain yourself, man. Don't make others do your work for you, right? You're the Mr. Philosophy. You're the Grail finder, right? Show it to us, man, right?
If you can throw an assault and rape in there, so much the better. Just tell me why these things are wrong. That's the whole gig. And you get a whole bunch of sound and fury signifying nothing but betrayal of the discipline.
Betrayal, yeah, that's the word I was looking for before. They are betraying you. Oh, they are so bad, right? Oh, framing dead people and their philosophy as betrayal so that people are sort of afraid of looking at their text, actually reading what they're saying, but just because Mr. One-Eyed King has told them they're bad. Only look at my UPP. It's fucking cultish, man. You're acting like a fucking cult leader. This sucks. This is so fucking ugly, man. I mean, you can't argue philosophically. You can only shout at the clouds and tell people, these are bad. Only read my tablets, right? Fuck off, man.
And through betrayal of the discipline, betrayal of humanity as a whole. I'm not saying they're Satan.
Oh man, now you have to appeal to his Christian friends, right? Because he doesn't have the backbone to stand by his own philosophy. He can't argue for it alone. He have to have somebody who he can rally and say, hey, I have friends over here who likes my philosophy, right? He can't stand alone and argue and say, I have made this philosophical connected series of thoughts that leads me to these conclusions, and I stand by them even if I'm alone on it. No, no, no. He has to bring in somebody, the libertarians or atheists or religious people. Doesn't matter what. He can contradict himself. One thing is, oh, it's the atheists, right? Then now it's the Christians he brings in. It doesn't matter if it contradicts what he did last time, right? So he doesn't basically have the backbone to stand on his own feet, right? He has to rally somebody else who has to, be some kind of elusive support for his shitty philosophy. Basically, it must be because he doesn't trust his own thinking, right? He's just put some words together and tried to convince people he has found the Holy Grail. It doesn't work, right? Nobody in 500 years is going to take this other than the ramblings of an idiot, right? You have to start doing better than this, right? What you need to do is, in my opinion, after all these, what are 4 decades of philosophizing, write a fucking strict treatise on philosophy from the deepest levels of the first principles of metaphysics in a connected way all the way to a fucking crystal clear moral principle, all the way through metaphysics, epistemology, objectivity, ethics, moral principles. That's it, right? That's what you need to do, and it needs to be fucking strictly great stuff, right? From your subjective thinking point of view, right? You can't bring in Kant, you can't bring in Hume. You have to think for yourself. It has to be your thinking. Then I'll be listening. Otherwise, you're just a big fucking hot air blower, right? You're nothing of a pretense of philosophy.
I'm just saying that it would be tough to differentiate them from that nihilistic and false belief system. So that's where I stand with this project. I aim to continue. I've got most of what I needed and clarified my growing disgust at the project. If you want me to continue, let me know, please. I will continue if you want me to, but it doesn't get prettier from here.
So what about this? I mean, I'm not particularly interested. I listened to his Spinoza and his John Locke, and it was interesting. I like that he actually has the approach of not just being lecturing about sort of an academic approach, but he's reflecting from his own standpoint. So I could give him kudos for that, right? But if anything, please do some Hume, right? And let me tear that fucking apart, right? I like this is what you are asking for, a treatise on human nature, being an attempt to introduce the experimental method of reasoning into moral subjects. Isn't that what you want? Why are you not deconstructing Hume's treatise? Right? Why are you not reflecting on that? Maybe even taking as a stepstone to the next level. Isn't this what you want? Maybe this is the Holy Grail, right? Fuck off, man. I think I get fucking triggered by this guy, right? I think there's an offset between, as I don't want to, after make a further discussion here of what he say, right? Other than, he leaves you with this. He leaves me, I should say, with a sense of emptiness, a sense of being manipulated, a sense of being just having words thrown at me with sort of a tentacles trying to grab certain emotional states in me in order to get me polarized towards people he wants me to reject, right? Now, if he does that, I will say that then I would rather listen to some of these philosophers than him, because he's trying to manipulate me. He's not trying to bring in the arguments or the quotes or saying this philosophy here is, I'm deconstructing Spinoza or anything like that. He presents you his version. And if you haven't read any Spinoza, how the hell do you know what Spinoza said, right? Or wrote? You don't, right? So he's basically trying to construct an idea of what went on until, the early 1700s here, right? And that it doesn't matter, because he's the master of the universe, right? That's the whole stick, the whole game. So I don't buy it, right? And if he doesn't do Hume, it's because he is too scared to do it, or he can't do it, or he doesn't know how to sophist you sufficiently in order to frame Hume as an idiot or something like that, right? Okay. Please share, like, and subscribe. Give me a comment. Let me know what you think. Please join the Discourse forum below, link below. And otherwise, have a nice day. See you in the next video.